Hello, hello, Jordan Sheridan live with Tina-Desiree Berg in the flesh, Wednesday, December 20th, the year 2023, in our United Corporations of America. These are very trying times, unprecedented, historic fuckery going on, including Donald Trump being removed from the Colorado ballot and all the hysteria as a result. Much of it warranted, I believe, actually. I do not think this is a case of, media sensationalism, because this is historic and it has major ramifications, both for the election, but also, your wheelhouse, Tina, which is the growing just
reactionary right, for lack of a better word.
Violent conspiracy, political extremism we're seeing, which I'm sure you saw online the last 24 hours as a result of this. My wife was telling me crazy shit she was seeing.
It's all predictable. I mean,
this is don't get
into it yet.
So we're gonna get into Trump being removed from the Colorado ballot. Neither of us are legal scholars, so I'm not going to predict whether it's going to hold up or not, but it's certainly going to the Supreme Court, that's for sure. We're also going to get into Biden is angry. Yesterday we got into he is angry at his staffers for his low polling numbers. Now apparently he's angry that the bridges aren't being built fast enough from his infrastructure deal, which was really just a privatization scheme. But I'll get into that. And then we're going to have Kevin Gosztola on from The Dissenter. He has led, I think, been the leading journalist covering the Julian Assange political persecution. And there is news in that. A court has now ruled that the CIA can actually be sued by
the Fourth Amendment.
Assange allies who visited him when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy years ago, and they spied on those visitors. Who was it? Was it Pam Anderson or Jenny McCarthy was one of the people visiting him? I forget.
Yeah, Pam Anderson definitely visited him.
Yeah, so they were spying, and now allies of Assange are able to sue the CIA, which I'm all for.
Also, some journalists, one from The Intercept is included. So
yes. So that's what's on tap. Smash that like button so we can get this to more people. Obviously, Tina, you and I have talked about together and separately what's going on in Gaza. So I had a nasty call from one of my family members today about that. So that was fun. They don't like my coverage. And I told them, well, then don't watch. What can I tell you? Well, let's start with Trump. A lot of people kind of maybe this slipped by them that this was a possibility. They forgot that Colorado Supreme Court was reviewing this. They kind of thought like, this ain't gonna happen.
It's been happening in a few states. So Michigan said no.
Right. Most other states their courts decided not to hear it. The Colorado Supreme Court 4-3 decision ruled that he should be removed from the ballot. And the three dissenters, interestingly enough, their arguments weren't really about whether Trump technically incited an insurrection. Their arguments weren't on the actual merits of whether he did that. It was more on Colorado state law, which obviously we're not going to get in the weeds of. And most importantly, the Supreme Court is not going to be deliberating Colorado state law. They're going to be deliberating the insurrection. I've seen a lot of lawyers on TV today, even ones that hate Trump, say they believe that the Supreme Court will overturn this. Whether that's true or not, I think the bigger impact here is this is going to have a major domino effect, because whether Trump's supporters want to hear this or not, the reality is I've seen it on the road and you've seen it on the road. There is a dark underbelly of this MAGA movement that is violent, conspiratorial, and believe what Trump is telling them, which is this is all a witch hunt. It's the deep state, and they're trying to end us. And that has led to violence. Before we play these clips, what are your thoughts on this, him being removed and what's going to happen as a result?
Okay, number one, I agree with you on that. The underbelly of it's the deep state, this anti-democracy, they just hate all of that's being fed by this decision. That is undoubtedly the case, and I think there might be some reactionary violence to it. I think it bears understanding what they're talking about with this insurrectionist ban to begin with. So this is part of the 14th Amendment, and this might seem counterintuitive because you think of the 14th Amendment as, you know, ending slavery, installing civil rights. But part of that amendment was that if you took part in an insurrection, you can no longer hold office. It doesn't explicitly say the presidency. It just talks about holding office. I think it was designed to keep the, you know, Confederate traitors, so to speak, quote unquote, air quotes, out of holding office. But it could be applied to something future if you see this as some sort of you know, self-defense mechanism for the democracy, right? If that's what your framing is for this. I do want to mention that in New Mexico, there was a county supervisor that was barred from holding office based on being a January 6th insurrectionist. So this would not be the first legal case in which this has been done. A judge had ruled on that in New Mexico. So I think the merits of it are there. I mean, did Trump incite an insurrection? I think they can make that pretty clear.
Did you hear what you just said?
No, what'd I say?
Oh, I thought you said, did Trump incite an erection? Go ahead. I'm pretty sure you did. But anyway.
Did I say that and not insurrection?
For some people, he might have. Anyway, go on.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fucking hilarious. Take that as Colin, you will, as the best Freudian slip ever. We might have to
go back later and clip that if it's what I think. Go on.
Okay. Insurrection, to be clear, that's so funny. Apparently, you're right. The chat's laughing. Okay. Insurrection, to be clear. You know, he's basically saying Mike Pence shouldn't validate the electoral college votes, asking based on the lie that he won the election, right? We don't need to rehash all of this stuff. So I do think there might be a case there to be made for them on the merits of that. My question, though, is this the best way to handle that, right? I don't know that it is. I think that having a more broad-based democracy makes sense at this point in time. I think taking him off the primary is just going to anger his followers, make him more of a martyr to the cause of saying that and now, of course, they're all saying it's the Democrats that are doing this because most of the judges were appointed by the Democratic Party, so there's always that, link. So no, I don't think it's the best way to handle it. I do think you're correct that there could be some reactionary responses to it. These guys are violent. They already believe conspiracy theories. Well,
we don't need to think about it. We know, and you've reported on this. After the Mar-a-Lago raid, not too far after that, a Trump supporter shot up the FBI office in Cincinnati.
Right.
So I'm no fan of the FBI or the CIA, but I'm not really, I'm not calling for violence against either. So we know Trump supporters have some of these mass shooters. We have found out later are not only Trump supporters, but Tucker fans and, the whole right wing pipeline. I feel kind of mixed on all of this, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
First of all, we have to define, and you and I were talking about this via text. We have to define what democracy means. Because I think there's different levels of democracy, and I'm not talking about the bastardized West Wing TV show version of a utopian democracy. Okay, so there's democracy in terms of one person, one vote, or people having a say, and it's literally not an autocracy. So technically, by that definition, we do have a democracy, right? Because it's not a dictator. It's not a dictatorship.
No, we haven't elected. We haven't elected whether it's representative or not. We do have an elected government. We cast a vote. We elect electors. We elect representatives, whatnot. So we are technically a democracy. Is our democracy in peril? Yes. Has it been bought and paid for by corporations? Yes.
I would argue we don't have a democracy because, like the 2014 Princeton study said, we have an oligarchy, not a democracy.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So, because just on the logistics of it, I don't really know how you can say you have a democracy if you're saying the people choose their leaders, but the people don't really choose their leaders because whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or hate both of them, I mean, in 6 out of the 7 last presidential elections, the person who got the most votes lost. So I don't think that could really be a democracy when you have an electoral college. But putting that aside, when you also have bought government. So technically you have the illusion of a democracy because you could go and vote, and you're told that you, the people, decide the elected leaders who then decide the course, policy. But whatever it is, 60%, 70% of popular will is never enacted into legislation. That's what I mean by we don't really have a democracy per se.
No, I don't disagree with anything you just said. I think you're correct.
But
technically we're a democracy, but
I would say
in theory, not practice.
I would say a dumb democracy. Maybe we'll make a graphic for that. But
or a capital erection, apparently.
Right. But let's just forget like the hucksters and the leftists who are winking at the right wing or just palling around with the right wing. January 6th, I don't care what Glenn Greenwald says, that this was just, a protest. It was an insurrection.
No, I agree. Yeah.
The bottom line is, if you are trying to overturn the results of an election that was free and fair, contrary to the cockamamie bullshit, and you're trying to do that not through a protest, which is protected, but by breaking and entering in the United States Capitol, contrary to, the FBI let them in. I mean, John Farina was there. We showed you. It wasn't just like open up the gates. They stormed through. And you're doing that to stop the voting and overturn the results. I don't really know what you want to call that an insurrection? You want to call it
I'm going to call it insurrection. No, I think, of course, that's exactly what it is. Yes.
To me, the courts, whether it be local courts, state Supreme Court, or the U.S. Supreme Court, they're actually not supposed to make decisions based on politics. We know that's not true because all the judges are now basically politicians in robes. So I'm actually okay with the decision.
Yeah.
If you believe constitutionally somebody did incite insurrection, then constitutionally, which all these Republicans now fucking hyperventilating on Fox News and all over are hyperventilating about this. They love holding their Constitution, but they don't want to adhere to the Constitution if it hurts them politically. So they're saying this is tyranny. Well, how is it tyranny?
It's not tyranny. I don't think it's tyranny.
This is what the 14th Amendment says.
It's crazy.
The Constitution does not say a convicted insurrectionist. It says nothing about them having to be convicted in a court of law. If it did, then we'd be having a different discussion. So he doesn't need to be convicted. You could think the better way of going about it is it being through a court of law, but constitutionally, he doesn't have to be. So then you just look at the facts. I don't really care if it's in vogue on the left, air quotes, to minimize January 6th. He did try to overthrow the elections. I would call that an attempted coup, an insurrection. Now, that's separate from, is this going to help him politically?
Right.
I think it is. I think it is going to help him.
I think you're right. I agree with everything you just said. I think it will help him politically because he's now a martyr. I don't know it's the best. Again, I don't know if this is the best way to handle the problem, but I think you're correct. I think by the definition of what is in the 14th Amendment, he absolutely is. The ruling makes sense to me. I'm not going to say it doesn't because I think it does make sense. The insurrection doesn't require a military or violent overturn. I just think the earmarks are enough there for what he did. So, yeah. I agree with all of that. I just don't know the outcome of it. I think could be drastic. I do think SCOTUS will overturn it because they're very politicized at this point as well. I don't see the people that have no problem getting rid of Roe v. Wade saying, yeah, no, this is bullshit. He's going to be on the primary ballot. I don't think this is going to achieve the intended goal whatsoever.
Right. Well, I also think you got to remember John Roberts, the Chief Justice, and a lot of these other people, they're very concerned about Roberts, to his credit, has put aside his conservative principles because I think he would have, in his heart, wanted to vote to repeal Obamacare, probably wanted to vote to repeal Roe v. Wade. But by the reports, he didn't want the court to go down as a partisan institution. And
I think that's right.
Yada, yada.
But I don't think you can make the same claim about Kavanaugh and some of the other new justices. Certainly not Clarence Thomas.
I also think in their rearview mirror, they're thinking about 2000. So the election 2000, which was stolen. And that really, in my view,
could motivate,
took the machete to the Supreme Court's legitimacy. So they could be looking at this as, well, we don't want the court to look like we're deciding, so we're going to put it back to the people. But at the end of the day, the election's going to be won over, in my view, two determining factors. One, if Biden drops out and the Democrats run somebody stronger, because I think Biden stays in there, it's bad news.
I agree. I think Gavin Newsom is running a shadow campaign and might be that individual. He's been sort of debating folks and having some sidebar events that lead to that for me.
And two independent voters. And a lot of independent voters do kind of lean right. And even though they might be turned off by Trump, I think a lot of independent voters might buy into, oh, we get to decide, the Democrat, they might buy into the Democrats are trying to rig this thing against Trump. I don't have many nice things to say about the Democrats, but it's kind of stupid and
I agree.
Delusional to say the Democrats are behind the Colorado Supreme Court. No.
Yeah, no. I think that's nonsense. If that were the case, then the entire court would have voted for removing Trump from the ballot. It was a very narrow 4-3 narrow. Right. So no, I think that's hogwash. And I do think the majority, I'm not going to say all, I do think the majority of judges that are appointed, no matter who they're appointed by, do feel the weight of the weight of the court and try to make decisions that aren't biased. I do believe that's true. Obviously not across the board. I think Kavanaugh is an exception. I think Scalia was an exception. Amy Coney Barrett, I think, is an exception. Thomas Clarence. I mean, that's just my feeling on it, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it remains to be seen. I do think this is going to be expedited. You might see this in the Supreme Court. I mean, I
think it has to be. January 4th is the deadline. I understand that it has to be seen by SCOTUS prior to then because of the way the primary season is set up. Yeah.
Well, we know how Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and, Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, I'm pretty sure this is going down. The question is, again, what happens both politically, but also, just in terms of the partisan hatred in this country, which is turning to violence. Maybe you could shed light on that, because I'm sure you have seen, maybe you could reveal some of the chatter you're seeing over the last 24 hours since this, because I do not think it's dramatic to say you might be seeing smaller January 6th at state capitals.
It wouldn't surprise me,
if the Supreme Court upholds this, but B, whether they do or not, I just think you might have some kooks get violent.
Oh, I agree. There is already anti-government sentiment that exists, within these groups, and it's not just solely being motivated by this. The other things that are happening, people have to keep this in mind tangentially is, I think we're going to talk about this later, but Trump's anti-immigration quotes from last week and other things that he's saying. He has taken more extreme stances this time around than he did the last time. And I think he's doing that to play to this base that we're discussing, the extremists, right? He had received criticism during his presidency for not going far enough to the right on many of these issues, including immigration and whatnot. So I think he knows that. He also realizes these are the voters he has to recapture if he's going to win the presidency. And that's what he's playing to. Whether he, deeply agrees with these sentiments or not, I don't think matters to him. He just wants to win. That's kind of his narcissism, right? So, like in Telegram, for example, you'll see a lot of these chats rooms where they're very motivated by what he's saying. They'll say like things about like Jewish people are controlling the immigration. They're letting in too many, brown and black folks. Oh, listen to what Trump just said. He's talking about blood. We're about blood. This is, this Nazi belief of blood and soil. So that animates them. So when the Colorado ruling comes in, now it's like the demo rats, right? That's what they call them, among other things, are now trying to take that away from him. They're not going to win. If he's pulled off the primary ballot, that is the end of our democracy. We have to act on it. 1776, that's continuing to be a cry from these guys. So I think there is a real danger there. But here's the thing, Jordan, not that that's for the court to consider, right? They're there to consider, okay, this is the law. This is what happened. These are the facts. Their rulings aren't supposed to be sort of politicized in that way, but there is this political environment that we are in that I do think is unprecedented in many ways, that we do need to take under consideration as a society writ large.
I want to play two clips. Both are from CNN's morning show. I don't know what order you have it, Colin, so just play the first one.
I was struck last night by the number of Democrats who was texting back. Given the context of January 6th, I heard from several Democrats last night saying, look, agree on the merits, unequivocally. The danger here, though, is real in terms of what might happen if this continues to move forward. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm not sure what they're talking about when they say the danger. I mean, the danger,
the risk of political violence, essentially.
The danger is Donald Trump, fundamentally. I mean, this is a man who repeatedly, over his entire political career in his time in the presidency, has scorned the rule of law. He has scorned our democracy. He has used political violence to achieve his ends. And he is now outright saying that he wants to be a dictator on day one and doubling down on that claim. So I think we should take Donald Trump for his word. He poses an existential threat to our democracy. That's why I will continue to do everything possible to make sure that he doesn't get anywhere near the Oval Office, because he is hell-bent on undermining and destroying our democracy and thwarting the right to vote of the American people.
I agree with what he's saying there wholeheartedly. I think Trump represents all of those things. So the only question I have is this the best way to handle it?
Yeah. Well, I also think that at the end of the day, and you and I were talking about this earlier, I think it's a fundraising tactic. Maybe some of the Democrats truly believe this, but it's no longer just about one person. I mean, yes, Trump is a unique threat, but even if Trump is removed from every ballot and he's ineligible, the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah.
What he has unleashed,
I agree.
He's going to be replaced possibly by a more extreme.
I think Ramaswamy is more extreme, for example. I don't disagree with that.
He's going to be replaced by a more extreme person who
Jordan,
maybe winks and nods a little bit more directly at the Proud Boys and all
100%.
these extreme groups. So I like his movement and what he's unleashed, which I believe is just to kind of, move the people who were racist, in the privacy of their kitchens and allow them to be racist, Islamophobic, sexist, nativist out in the open. He's just going to be replaced because you can't really just put that back in the bottle. No. Not to say it's not to say it doesn't matter if Trump gets reelected. I'm just saying this whole Trump is the unique threat. It's going to be another Trump. That's why I've kind of done away with the whole, people could vote for whoever they want. I'm not going to tell people who to vote for, but the lesser of two evils, even if you hold your nose this time, 2028, it's going to be DeSantis or Tom Cotton or name your fucking lunatic. They might be a little nicer sounding than Trump, but on policy, they're going to be just as fascistic. So to me, what that politician's saying, you could agree with him, but I think they are not totally leveling with people that whether it's Trump or not, there's a long movement here. Yes.
We have a much bigger problem. And in fact, everybody will want to tune in Friday with my interview. I'm talking specifically about folks that were once on the left that have been completely red-pilled into right-wing extremism. We're talking about people that maybe supported Bernie Sanders.
Any names?
Oh yeah, lots of names. Okay. But I'm not gonna say. But point being that's actually a thing, and there's a whole process by which this has happened. I'm gonna say that the root of this stems back many decades. I'm gonna say it's income inequality. The left has chosen not to provide a left exit to that, leaving this gaping hole open for right-wing populism, using my scare quotes, which is not only a spot that Trump stepped into and elevated, but it has continued to grow outside of Trump being president. I don't think that's a controversial statement at this point. We have a bigger problem here. And it's going to be very hard to deal with because I don't think it's a simple one. There's no simple solution here. Part of the conversation has to be the media, right? Where has the media enabled more of this because they wanted more clickbait? Where have media personalities, and I'm not talking about journalists here, I'm talking about people that are maybe grifting off of some of these movements. Maybe they're getting some Peter Thiel cash on the side. They're part of the conversation. I think Fox News has been very bad for society because, again, these aren't news organizations. These are media personalities. They're not fact-checking anything that they put out into the public. They don't care if it's real or not. They don't care if it's got veracity or if it's true. They only care about making money. And that's true of also of YouTube stars, Telegram stars, guys like Nick Fuentes, right? So it's not necessarily those people solely who are responsible, but the folks that they bring along with them. And those growing numbers are very much problematic because we live in a post-truth where people are, entitled to believe whatever they want to believe and call it truth. So in this environment that we are in, the more extreme presidential candidates are winning out, and that includes Trump. I think it's very telling that Asa Hutchinson, who is probably, I can't believe I'm saying this. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but I am saying it. Asa is probably the most moderate, rational individual that's running in this GOP primary. And look at where he's polling at. 1%.
Well, he's out. He's out
now. Yeah. Okay, so there you go. I mean, that just tells you where the tenor.
And I agree. I agree. He's an Asa, but his name is Asa.
Oh, is it Asa? I always thought it was Asa.
That's
okay. Anyway, point being that this is the individual. I'd say then the next one would be Chris Christie. He's also polling very low. I can't believe I'm saying he's the moderate guy in the race, but Nikki Haley, she represents a different sort of extremism, right? She's neoconservative, not embracing all of the populism necessarily that Trump is. But I also think that she would go along with whoever wins, including him. I don't think she has a problem with that because everybody in, it's a team sport. I don't know. I think we have we have much bigger issue facing us than just Trump. Has Trump been sort of an instigator? Yes, of course he has. He held the highest office and said all kinds of crazy things that appeal to these folks. But I think the bigger issue, Jordan, is that those numbers are not dwindling away. They're not going away. And the voices that are leading these folks are becoming much more extreme, very anti-government. It's a matter of time before we have another Timothy McVeigh out there doing something like.
Speaking of that, Colin, did you find the clip of Trump and poisoning the blood?
Country, when they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world, not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, but all over the world. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. They're pouring into our country. Nobody's even looking at them. They just come in. The crime is going to be tremendous. The terrorism is going to be, and then we built a tremendous piece of the wall, and then.
All right, so I want to point something out. Not only this whole blood and soil rhetoric, but notice the countries that he named specifically, Africa and Asia. These are brown folks. He's not saying immigrants from Sweden or immigrants from, any other quote unquote white nation. So that's a specific dog whistle right there. And then also he follows that up by saying that these are future terrorists. This is a domestic terrorist issue, right? Which is crazy.
Right. Well, the reason we played that, because that happened last week, apparently in Iowa. Well, first, let's set it up. Colin, if you could show the poll. This is currently in Iowa among the caucus. Seems like it's a wrap. Most of the polls show this, but Emerson, this is the latest. Trump's at 50. Nikki Haley is, 33 points behind. DeSantis and Ramaswamy, and so Trump, it's short of something really, really unprecedented. Trump is going to win Iowa, probably New Hampshire, and it'll be a wrap by then. But apparently, his numbers have gone up after the poisoning the blood. This is from the Des Moines Register. After this comment, which, to be clear, is similar things were said by Hitler.
Yeah, 100%. Blood and soil is an old Nazi trope, right?
Yeah. So according to the Des Moines Register, as Trump seeks the Republican nomination, he has laid out his vision, blah, 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 blah. Former president's comments have ignited concerns from critics and scholars. Many likely Iowa Republican caucus goers have no issue with several of Trump's recent controversial statements. A new Des Moines Register NBC poll shows. And more often than not, they say the same statements make them more likely to support the former president. Listen, I'm not going to be an MSNBC host, clutching my pearls and being like, I can't believe these voters. But it just kind of shows you, when you have no alternative to meet your basic economic, social needs,
what happens.
Sometimes you get drawn in by this nativism, nationalism, and
strongman
fascism.
I agree. Speaking of pearl clutching, I'm going to read. This is one of the largest Proud Boy Telegram chat rooms out there. This is the quote that I'm reading right now in regards to this. Pearl clutching beep who want to bow to the diversity altar. They still don't have a clue who their base is. We're no longer affected by being called racist, sexist, blah, 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 blah. They don't care if you call them racist. They're out there being racist and they know they're racist. They don't care. I mean, and to be fair, the Proud Boys are one of the least extreme of the groups that I monitor, right? So they're generally trying not to be like super Nazis, right? They're saying we are a diverse organization. We are, right-wing politics. We do like strongman politics per se, but our club is open to, people of different orientations. But I have to say, without equivocation, the more time you spend watching these guys' chat rooms, the more anti-Semitic and racist crap you will find in there. There's no two ways about that. So I don't personally buy that most of these guys aren't incredibly extreme in their positions, but they still try to play that game. But point being is here they're talking about that pearl clutching beat. That's the first thing they open with.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to change subjects before Kevin comes on.
Right.
This hasn't been getting a lot of attention when you want to talk about democracy or supposed democracy. We know the Democratic Party has rigged the primaries in some 2016 and 2020, kind of behind the scenes, but we all kind of saw it. But now, just openly, we're not having a primary. We're not going to,
which is also a problem. It's just enabling this stuff.
And I think is in part in why a lot of younger voters might choose not to vote for Biden or just not vote because the whole thing was rigged. But we've seen the media leave Marianne Williamson out of stories when they're naming candidates or from the beginning, cite Marianne Williamson or RFK as not serious candidates. My thoughts on RFK are not a secret, but I don't think it should be the media to dictate who's serious and who's not. But now it's gotten to the point where the Democratic Party is leaving them off the ballot in states. So Marianne Williamson and I still can't believe I'm saying this, Cenk Uygur were left off the ballot in Florida.
Wait, Cenk Uygur's running for president? How did I miss that?
Yeah, you miss a lot of things. I'm always calling Tina and I'm like, hey, what do you think? And you're like, about what? And like,
I'm super focused on what I cover, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, so now let's read Marianne Williamson's tweet. Now they're leaving her off the ballot in North Carolina, happening in real time. Right now, the North Carolina Election Board is accepting ballot declarations for the political parties. Shocker, not. The Democratic Party only submitted the name of Joe Biden. I'm here to argue for my inclusion based on the fact that I'm an FEC certified candidate. Our campaign has been in the national press, and we're on the ballot already in over 20 states. So far, no room for public comment. The board's
this is awful.
Be made on January 2nd. North Carolinians, please be ready to attend the meeting on that day. More details to come. This is the biggest issue. There is a pattern here. The DNC is doing everything possible to make sure Joe Biden is the only candidate listed on ballots in whatever state they can. So to be clear, in my view, this is not about like whether you would never vote for a Democrat and your Dem exit. It's not about whether you support Cornel West. It's not about whether you support Jill Stein. It's not about whether you hate them all. Or if you like Marianne Williamson or you don't, because there's been a lot of criticism of her. There's been stories of mistreatment of staffers, vindictive behavior, all that stuff. So put aside whether you support Marianne Williamson or not. This is about, again, democracy.
I agree.
I don't care if it's an incumbent president. If in America, if you're 35 years of age, if you were born here, if you meet, certain signature standards, you're eligible and should be on the ballot. So
I agree.
who is the DNC, who's a private entity, by the way? It's not like a governmental organization. It's a private corporation.
Right.
Who are they? Right. And it's not just the DNC. It's the state parties and the Board of Elections who are in bed with the DNC. You're literally, it's not just rigging. You are literally doing the opposite of democracy.
I agree. It's gross. It's also why we keep staring down the barrel of more fascism. And I don't understand why the DNC doesn't understand that. They have part and parcel all along enabled all of this. And this is just another example of them doing so. Let her be on the ballot. How is that a threat to you? Also, if it is a threat to you, then maybe you need to run a better candidate.
Well,
nobody
first of
owes
all,
you their votes. Nobody. This is still, people go and they vote for the person they like the best in a democracy. And I want to increase the democracy. We already had the conversation about whether or not we are a democracy. So I'm going to table that for now. But my point is that votes need to be earned. They should be earned. And when the DNC does things like this, it angers people. The largest block of voters in this country are the non-voters. And it's because of reasons like this. If they made appeals to these folks by not doing the things that they're doing, whether it's stopping Bernie Sanders, Marianne Williamson, whoever, we'd be in a much different position today as a country, in my opinion.
Well, also, and by the way, smash the like button. Remember, helps us get this out to more people. Super chats are welcome. I'll read them at the end. Also, put aside the just moral decay of this. From a pure political perspective, doesn't the Democratic Party realize that this is only going to make more people run third party?
Yeah, of course.
Cornel West,
right?
I think he chose to run. He's run so many different parties. Now he's independent. I think he chose not to run in the Democratic Party for two reasons. One was moral and one was practical.
Right.
One, Democratic Party doesn't align with his views. But two, was practical. Why would I run in the Democratic Party if I know they're going to rig it? And a lot of people asked Marianne Williamson, why don't you just run Green Party or independent if you know they're going to rig it? She said, if other people want to do that, great to them. I don't, for me, I want to run in the Democratic Party. But if every 4 years it gets worse and worse in terms of the rigging, a lot of people who might actually be kind of like capital D Democrat, they might say, you know what? I'm going to run independent. I'm going to run Green Party. And then you're creating more quote unquote spoilers, which I don't even believe in. I think that's bullshit. But you're going to get even more people next go around to run Green Party, independent, create their own parties. So you're going to have even more people splitting the vote, thus you losing, which then brings us back to the time-tested question. Are they actually trying to lose, Tina?
Yeah. It certainly seems that way because these things are so obvious to me, right? They're so obvious. And yet I keep saying to myself, why doesn't the DNC see this? If the DNC chose not to be that party, what they're doing right now, if they chose not to be the party that stopped Bernie Sanders, if they chose to not be the party that has all of these corporate lobbyists as super delegates that make decisions based on who they're, who's giving them the paycheck, they could make all of these changes. They could go back to being sort of, the FDR party that supports the working class nonstop, right? But there's no benefit to any of this unless their only benefit is to hold on to power, and that the handful of people that do have power at the top of the DNC, if that's all they care about, well, this is the perfect way to do that. If it doesn't matter that eventually they erode their base to nothing. But honestly, if they didn't do this stuff, Jordan, I really think that the Democratic Party would rule in perpetuity. I do. Because their ideas, the things that they supposedly give lip service to, are popular in this country. They're popular ideas.
If they actually fought for them and tried to enact them, absolutely.
Exactly.
They don't. But I want to point out another aspect about this, and this is not just about Marianne Williamson, all of them. We got to say it's not just the DNC, it's also the media who are one and the same. Yeah. I believe you are rigging it when Marianne Williamson, RFK, and some polls, even Cornel West, have had higher support than Chris Christie, who CNN has given a town hall to.
Yep.
Then Vivek, well, I can't pronounce his name. I don't mean that in a bigoted way. I just can't pronounce it. He's gotten a town hall. Marianne Williamson has polled higher than Vivek Ramaswamy for months. Maybe not now, but she did. So did RFK. Now, I could understand not wanting to give RFK a town hall because he's a conspiracy loon. Right. But by the numbers, he has more support than Vivek, who they gave a town hall to. Chris Christie. Not only do they give town halls to, Chris Christie basically lives in the green room at MSNBC and CNN. He's on all the time when he's got 2% national support. Right. They gave a town hall, I believe, to what was the Christie, Ramaswamy, Haley. They gave a town hall to when she was very low in the polls. So they won't have Marianne Williamson on Sunday morning shows. They won't have Marianne Williamson on CNN, MSNBC for the most part. They won't give her an hour town hall when she has more support by the polls than a lot of these same people throw in RFK for that. That is undemocratic.
I agree.
The devil's advocate could say, well, it's not the media's job to enforce democracy. Well, back in the day,
the
media was a public entity.
That's right.
It was publicly funded before Bill Clinton signed the 1996 telecommunications bill that it was already kind of privatized, but then put it on steroids. So it's the DNC rigging it, the state parties rigging it, the Board of Elections rigging it, and the media rigging it. No shit, then sometimes you're going to get cranks who become violent.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's the inevitable outcome. I laugh because,
And you want to know what I really think went on here?
It's so obvious.
This is kind of unprecedented, Tina. I really, truly believe that they know Biden cannot hold up in a debate. Meaning,
I agree.
Can he actually be on stage for 2 hours? Yes. But would it be devastating for him? Yeah. Because when you're aging, I mean, the difference between 3 and 4 years is huge. Is huge.
And he had issues before.
Yeah, he had issues in 2020. So how would he look in 2023 or 2024? So that's why I think they were even more brazen about rigging it, kicking them off the ballots, not having them on TV. So there would be no push at all for debates because they know if Biden debated, well,
it has the potential of being devastating. I mean, I remember at the Iowa caucus, in 2020, I can't remember if you went to the Biden thing or not, but I remember thinking, this is in 2020. I remember thinking, oh, let's pay zero attention to this guy at this point. He doesn't have his wits about him. This is like terrible. At his event at the Iowa caucuses in 2020, I was shocked. I remember being completely shocked when the DNC kind of like pushed him into the candidate slot by doing all of the backdoor deals that they did, because I was like, this is the worst candidate you have running in this primary. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I get that you guys hate Bernie, but really? This guy out of all of the other options? This is insane. And yet here we are.
All I know, not that she's got like a Bernie type movement, but DNC, Democrats, Biden, David Axelrod, James Carville, don't be shocked when Marianne Williamson diehards, and there are some, don't come out and vote for you because you rigged the primary and didn't give her a fair shake.
They won't come out. Yeah. And, the worst part, though, is they're opening the door for these folks to be pulled into the, red pill pipeline. I don't know how folks don't understand that either. A lot of this anger is being just fundamentally driven by anti-establishment feelings, right?
Right.
It's not necessarily moored to any specific political beliefs. A lot of these folks are simply accelerationists. They are tired of being treated this way. They're tired of being told that they have to accept whatever the party says, lesser of two candidates, blah, blah, blah. My concern, though, personally, this is my personal point of view now, is that I think a lot of these folks really believe that if everything gets burnt down and we accelerate everything to the point where the democracy is shattered and we rebuild something, that what we rebuild is going to be more progressive, a better democracy. I don't personally think that that's true. I think what comes next, if we do that, is fascism, is some sort of authoritarian autocracy of some sort. So that is my personal concern because that's how I feel about it. But I don't know, you might have a different idea of that. But I worry about this.
I just say watch The Lion King and see what happened when Scar took over the kingdom. Because
fair.
If not, there's not always going to be a Simba coming back to save the day. Now, from one morally bankrupt, shadowy entity to the next, let's get into the CIA. Because the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, all the quote unquote deep state, obviously they've been doing a bipartisan persecution of Julian Assange for the last, at this point, well over a decade, but specifically his imprisonment over the last few years in Britain. He is still in prison. We'll get an update on where things stand with that. But kind of good news today. For years, when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, he had visitors and the CIA spied on him.
Yeah. On the visitors, too.
Yeah. So let's bring on now Kevin Gosztola. You are the publisher of The Dissenter, which everyone should check out. Yeah. We'll put a link in the super chat. Kevin, big ruling today. Tell us what was decided on, because now I believe it's very rare that the CIA could be sued. But
yeah, wow,
it's extraordinarily rare, and this comes from yesterday. So thank you for having me on. there's a ton of Assange news right now. Big developments in the last 36, 48 hours. So I'm really happy that you are all in tune with it and covering it. We know that it's very extraordinary that a judge wouldn't just dismiss claims of civil liberties violations that were committed by the CIA. It's really, really hard for the government to lose, and this is what losing looks like. I mean, you can read through the decision. There are parts of it that were allegations against the CIA that were rejected by this judge. But the thrust of it is that there are concrete allegations made to suggest that people's Fourth Amendment rights under the Constitution were violated when their electronics were copied.
Wow.
Their electronics were copied. They went through a security checkpoint, and when they met with Julian Assange, they went into the embassy. In order to talk to Julian Assange, you had to leave your belongings. And while they were doing that,
they copied the contents.
This private security company called UC Global was taking photographs and presumably sharing the contents of those devices with with other people in the UC Global. That information was then passed along to the CIA and other various intelligence agencies.
That's shocking.
Not really. I mean,
all right, fair. It's not, but it is. I guess it's more shocking that this lawsuit is allowed to go forward.
But also, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that kind of an attack on the country of Ecuador, who gave him, safe, whatever the term was, I forget, but he was supposed to have security, privacy, dignity in their embassy, and the United States was basically infiltrating and surveilling him on Ecuador's grounds.
Yeah, so the reason why the security company was there in the Ecuador embassy is because they were hired by Ecuador, and they were providing security for Rafael Correa, who was the Ecuador president that granted asylum to Julian Assange in 2012. This was in the summertime. He was there for about almost 7 years before he was expelled. And the president, Lenin Moreno, who actually was involved later on in persecuting Rafael Correa, and his people were involved in Rafael Correa ultimately fleeing and living in exile in Belgium, facing similar political charges like Lula in Brazil. That same kind of a trumped up criminal case in order to make it so that party would then be inept and not able to compete against the right wing in Ecuador. And so this company then, the director, David Morales, both UC Global and David Morales are actually defendants in this lawsuit. But I think one of the issues is, how do you pursue a civil lawsuit against people who are foreigners? Like, they're not in the United States. So We've only been seeing that the claims against the CIA and Mike Pompeo have moved forward. We haven't been able to figure out, I think, what's going to come of UC Global and David Morales. But those people are facing a form of justice in the Spanish courts, because that's where Julian Assange went. And we know a lot of the information about what went on at the embassy because of the fact that that court has allowed so much to come out from whistleblowers and journalist testimony, and documents have been gone over, and a judge has been seeking information in that case. And this is all going on while the U.S. government seeks extradition of a journalist. This is the backdrop of the U.S. government fighting any sort of redress for the way that people's rights were violated when they visited Julian Assange. This is the same government that is also pursuing an unprecedented political case against Julian Assange.
And isn't it kind of ironic that the U.S. government, based on nothing, is accusing Julian Assange of co-hacking the Pentagon or whatever, in obtaining and releasing the Afghanistan war logs and all that, when basically they hacked these visitors' electronics.
Right.
So one, there's no evidence for that Julian Assange did that, but here you have evidence that they illegally hacked, or whatever the term is, allies of Assange's personal,
and also
devices.
journalists that were there visiting him. So they were just copying the contents of their electronic devices. I would imagine that there would be some idea that that is invasion of privacy. You do not expect to hand over your electronic goods to some private security firm and have them copy all your contents. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so let's just get to the part of, so credit to the judge. Credit to the judge. Also, it's just worth noting that Judge John Kodal in the Southern District of New York heard a case involving WikiLeaks previously. I don't know if you know this or remember this, either of you, but Tom Perez in the DNC sued WikiLeaks and the Trump Organization and some Russian nationals, claiming that they needed to be held accountable for the release of the Clinton campaign emails in 2016. And the judge threw that out because they said under the First Amendment, John Kodal recognized that you have a First Amendment right to publish hacked materials. There was no evidence or proof that WikiLeaks was involved in hacking to get access to these materials. There was no evidence or proof that they were involved in illegality to obtain these, no more than somebody receiving leaks and deciding that they wanted to share them with the public. So John Kodal upheld that, and part of that is the Pentagon Papers precedent from the great Daniel Ellsberg whistleblower. So, you know, now John Kodal upheld the idea that this case moves forward. You get to seek justice for the copying of your electronics. However, he entertained the idea from the government that they had no privacy when they met with Julian Assange in a national security context. This is something that the government was arguing that I fully reject. One of the absurdities of all of this is the assistant U.S. attorney, Jean-David Barnea, coming in and saying that, in fact, these Ecuador security that was hired, they're no different than police. So apparently, when it comes to jurisprudence in the U.S., there's a lot less privacy that you have under the Constitution when you're in a police station, when you're in a police department, when there's all of this going on. So they were likening the Ecuador embassy to a police station.
That's crazy.
Let me just quickly unravel this absurdity, and then you can work with me if you want to carry this on and figure out why this is so crazy. But first of all, none of those Ecuador security police are deputized to, I don't know, enforce the law. They're just protecting that embassy.
Right. Yeah, no, they're not instruments of the U.S. government. That's certainly the case. That is a leap of faith that I cannot abide. That makes no sense.
And moving forward to the other big news, a date has been set for February for Julian Assange's final appeal in the UK. Obviously, even though a lot of leftists care about Assange, you don't hear about it in the news, so people might have forgotten where things stand in the process because there's been so many, cases and appeals and this and that. Can you tell people where this stands? Is this really the final appeal? And, what are the chances of this being reversed, his extradition?
We just need to emphasize the punishment by process that has gone on in this case. I mean,
Kevin is a new dad, so don't yell at him for the baby.
I am doing my first live broadcast interview with.
Congratulations, by the way.
But she's actually pretty well behaved, except when you're trying to do a live interview. If we were recording this not live, there would be no issue.
No issue.
But let me answer your question. 1 second.
Okay.
So let's do this. Let's do this.
Aw.
We'll do it.
Oh, what a precious little thing.
See if you can settle down for just a second. Okay. All right. The answer to your question is that the High Court.
Here, I'll let you do your thing. I'll just mute you while you try to.
Just give me 1 second, and I'll be right back.
Cool. So, what do you think about that, Tina? Because I got to tell you,
that's insane. So, I don't think you gave up your expectation to privacy by handing over your electronic equipment to a private security firm. They are not the U.S. government. And in fact, my understanding, and I'd like to ask Kevin this is a Spanish private security firm that was contracted. And apparently the David Morales character, he was taking these files and putting them, there was a file on his computer that said CIA. So he was obviously gathering up these files, putting them there and handing them over to the CIA. I think that is insane. That is beyond the pale as far as I'm concerned. This is these are private things. These are not, oops, I stumbled upon some domestic terrorist plot on this Telegram channel. You know what I'm saying? You're now going into people's protected private devices and taking information off of them. That is an illegal crime, in my opinion.
Also, we want to get back to the original theme of this broadcast, democracy.
Right.
You don't think the United States was involved in this? Didn't know about it? Maybe collaborating?
Well, I mean, sort of the question becomes like, how rogue is the CIA? I do believe.
Go ask the people of Iran, right. Somalia.
I don't think the CIA. I don't think the CIA gets permission from Congress every time they decide to do something. So I think the CIA has done incredibly horrifyingly bad things in the name of the U.S. government without the permission of the U.S. government. And maybe something should be done about that.
Well, it is capitalism's invisible army. That's what CIA stands for.
I don't disagree. It's capitalism.
And, the CIA doesn't need permission.
I see what you did there.
In their mind, it's not. I stole
right.
it. I heard that from someone. It wasn't mine.
And that's good. That's a good one.
I got to say, I really think it's rich when they're saying, Julian Assange is the biggest threat to democracy and yada, 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 when every step of this process has been undemocratic. Yeah. Obama, it's very rare I credit him, but he was right and deserves credit for not prosecuting Assange. Right. Because he just said, you'd be setting a dangerous precedent if you're prosecuting Assange.
It is absolutely a dangerous precedent. This should not be happening. Everybody needs to step back from this. But
then you have Trump. He handed it over to Mike Pompeo and those stooges. They were
let's be
plotting
fair.
under the.
Hillary Clinton would have done the same thing. I don't think she would have a different point of view than Trump on this. I really don't.
Oh, I don't either. But Trump and his people, they were plotting to kidnap Assange, assassinate. Right. Doesn't sound democratic.
No,
Then you got
Jordan,
Biden coming in, and Biden, even when a lot of people in his administration were telling him
not to
drop this.
Yeah. He's gusto for it. What do you make of all of these Trump supporters that are also Assange supporters, right? Free Assange. They're all behind Assange, and yet here they are supporting Trump.
I just think it's anti-state. Oh, there he is. Okay. Kevin and the cute baby are back.
Oh my God, she's so cute. I can just die.
All right. We'll have a special guest here. And the answer to your question is that the hearing in February that is scheduled is one in which we should treat it as the final opportunity for having a crack at justice in the legal system in the UK. And I don't think there's been much justice at all for Julian Assange. It's all been punishment by process. And essentially, you're kind of left wondering if he might have a better chance in a U.S. court. And I find that to be absurd, but also we've never seen a journalist put on trial under the Espionage Act. And we've never, we don't even know what arguments the Assange defense are going to try to make, but we don't know what a judge is going to think about all of this. And how,
I think that's fair.
And how, basically, look, I don't want him to be in a U.S. jail. I don't want him to be in a U.S. jail, and neither does my daughter Audrey, apparently. But just the fact of the matter is that the UK has been completely compromised in that they're serving the interests every step of the way of the U.S. government so that they are not alienating an ally. I mean, basically, this is the government that Tony Blair ran and made sure that George W. Bush got his invasion of Iraq, and they stood by him like a poodle, and they still do it. All right. I'm
Kevin,
sorry, guys.
I have one quick question, though. I know she's crying, but I want to ask you about having the trial in the U.S. versus the UK. I think you have a point there that it might be better based simply on the fact that the British government does, or England does not have a First Amendment protection the way we do in the United States. And I'm thinking specifically about the fact that journalists have been sued in UK courts for defamation for simply reporting on the news. So it might be the case that First Amendment protection ends up being more beneficial here. I mean, is that what you're sort of getting at?
Well, it's a little complicated. Look, I don't want Julian Assange to come to the U.S. at all. Nobody wants to see him here. What we want is him to be able to go free and go to Australia
100%.
and be home with his family. And Australia has done quite a bit to make sure that has done quite a bit to make sure that he, could be freed and go home. I mean, they've been pressuring the Biden administration.
Yeah.
That's more than I ever thought it would happen at all for Julian.
Yeah. No, that would be the ideal situation.
Listen, I'm gonna have to run.
Put your binky to bed.
But there's going to be plenty to cover into the new year. I think the really good thing here is that we're finally getting to a point of closure. And it's going to be clarifying, I think. It's going to be really clarifying where Biden stands. Let me just close on this point. Well, I know she's fussing, but let me fuss through it and just make one final political point that you guys can talk about without a baby in the background later. This is the same government right now that is backing the Israeli military as they have killed 75 to 100 journalists with U.S. weapons. This is part of the backdrop just as much as Julian Assange. When we hear about press freedom and democracy, this is what we need to think about.
I agree.
Everyone, happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Kevin.
Sorry.
Congratulations. No worries. She's adorable.
Audrey says hello, even though she's angry.
And everybody check out Kevin at the Dissenter. We'll put it in the description. Thanks, man.
He makes a very valid point there. Absolutely.
I don't know, because I don't know if any judge or jury are going to go against the CIA in this country. It's never happened before. However, at least in the United States, if there was a trial, you have the masses of people out there that would be supporting him. The media really couldn't ignore it. And
no, they couldn't. And I don't think any news organization should be behind this, because it puts us on a slippery slope as journalists. Period. End of story. Ideally, I agree with Kevin. Like, he should be released and go home to Australia, and that it's all over with. But I do find it sort of compelling, and something I hadn't thought about is the fact that we do have a First Amendment here, whereas the UK does not. I personally know journalists that have been sued in UK courts simply for reporting facts.
The bottom line is the case in the U.S. would really hinge on, do they have any actual, not bullshit, but actual evidence that Julian Assange was working with getting
hackers,
into the Pentagon or Army computer systems and releasing this stuff. Because I can't see them having. I
don't think they have that evidence, and so
it wasn't laid out at all what any specifics in the indictment.
Right.
Because if not, then you're basically you're criminalizing
journalism,
the
publisher, First Amendment. Not
the source. So we'll see.
I agree. That's exactly what's key here. So perhaps the First Amendment steps into play. Kevin's right. We don't know what a judge would say or do. I think that's a valid point.
Right. Thanks to the super chat, Tony, $1.99, Jordan and Tina, favorite status duo. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Tony.
Cyber Hobbit, $10, wanted the baby to speak.
Yeah.
She spoke. Kevin did his best, but crying baby is a crying baby. Gotta feed or put her to bed. Tina, tell people what you have coming up on Friday at 5:00 Eastern. Right Wing Insanity.
Right. So this week on Right Wing Insanity, we are going to be looking at what I'm going to call the post left to the dissident right. So these are folks, whether they're in the media, whether they're following people in the media, whether they're just angry voters, like that whole pipeline. I will say this, it's the opposite of horseshoe theory, right? So a lot of liberals want to say this is horseshoe theory, like you bend the right and the left up this way, and at the top you have the extremes that have a common cause, and that's what joins them together. I'm saying that's totally wrong. It's more of a pipeline, because I don't think people that are like arguing for hard right principles such as what a neo-Nazi would like are even remotely left. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. Anyway, but my guest will be Oliver Lee Bateman. Oliver is a journalist, longtime journalist. We used to work together at Washington Babylon back in the day for Ken Silverstein, which is how I know Oliver. But he had gone off and done this post-left podcast with one of these individuals, left the podcast and was like, this is crazy train. So I'm going to be talking with him about that whole pipeline.
Gotcha. I'm looking forward to 5:00 Eastern. As a reminder, folks, on December 30th, so Saturday, December 30th, put it in your pipe and smoke it. We're going to have a end of year marathon starting around noon Eastern time. I don't know all the details, but Tina will be on it. I'll be on it. I think Ron, think Lewis, John Farina. We'll have some special guests and try to fundraise, gain, add new Status Coup members. Hint, hint, sign up. StatusCoup.com/join. You can sign up for $5 to $10 a month. So we'll go through all our on the ground reporting from this year, UAW strike, Tina on the ground at Cop City in Atlanta, East Palestine, all the rest, and kind of, do a little end of year marathon, probably, I don't know, 3-4 hours, but it'll be fun. And other than that, I'll see you Friday, Tina, and we'll see the rest of you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.